Hey everybody, welcome back to Celebrity Politics, the show. I'm Danielle.
And from behind the camera, I'm Josh. We've taken some time off this summer, but politics has not.
So join us with our co-hosts, Richard, Rachel, and Jeff, while we discuss the top 10 political stories that you may have missed while you're at camp. Okay, so I'll take this one because I am in that boat along with Richard. Week 2 of school, depending on when your child started, it could be full week 2 or just partial week 2. My daughter made it 2 days into school, and now I am working from home because my son came home from daycare with a runny nose, and now we're going for a family field trip to get a COVID test before any of us to our normal life. Yay. So the government sort of, depending on who you talk to, the government dragged their feet on kind of having a plan for schools to reopen. There was not a lot of direction, not a lot of funding provided to not only schools, but childcare centers as well. So there was that big piece too. So those two kind of not necessarily went hand in hand, but they were tied together. So the boards came up with their back to school reopening plan. They had them in 3 phases. There was the full reopening, there was a partial reopening, and then there was a, we're not doing this at all. I decided to send my kids back to school. After reading the plan, I felt pretty confident in the way that they were handling things and the protocols that they had in place. And so my kids went back. And as I said, week 2, we're not back. We're at home. So something that last year, like a runny nose and a sniffle, wouldn't have drawn much attention, now gets the child sent home. And there's not a lot of options on the table for parents. So what do we do? And is this the new normal? And how do we move forward? And Richard, what did you?
I mean, runny nose and a sniffle, my God. I mean, a week goes by without a runny nose and a sniffle. That's a good week. If you know, this is, to me as a parent as well, and my children are back at school as long as school is open for them to attend it. And we've been lucky. It's, 6 days into the school year and there hasn't been an outbreak reported. There have been cases reported in schools in Ontario, but there hasn't been an outbreak reported. But our cases are climbing, notwithstanding the fact that school's back in session. So I just don't see how, it's sort of like we're climbing back up this mountain again when it comes to cases, and the kids are back to school at the same time. So I mean, Danielle, I'm so sorry to hear that. And I'm basically counting the days until, one of my kids, has a cough or one of 100 normal everyday symptoms that could be misinterpreted as COVID. Now, my wife happens to work with children at the hospital. So, she's already had several COVID tests over the course of time. I haven't had any because she gets them quicker than I can, and she just goes and does it and she gets the results back pretty quick. So I think that, if we have to go back and get a test, it's no big deal. It's kind of routine for us now almost. Kids have had some too. And I just don't like the idea that we have to miss school in order to do that.
What about the parents?
But it's better than the whole. Yeah, I know. It's and in my role, I need to be very vigilant because my new job is to travel around and talk to people, and and I have to be extremely, extremely vigilant with my procedures. Jeff has stopped wearing pants because of COVID, because he cares. He doesn't want anyone to catch anything, right, Jeff?
It helps with the social distancing.
I bet.
Nobody wants to be in the same room as me.
Yeah. It's not just because of the pants thing, Jeff.
One of the big things about this whole the back to school is it's really showcased the end of the kumbaya in Canadian politics, where everybody was willing to work together, right?
Yeah.
The reality is we need to find ways to operate under COVID. We need to find ways to keep things moving. Otherwise, we don't have food. We won't have supplies to put the food in. We won't be able to transport the food. There's only so long you can go where things aren't essential, right? Like, if COVID lasts 3 years, do we have 3 years of kids not getting educated in an effective way? The longer the timeline looks, the more things start becoming essential. And it was really disappointing in this one how much the teachers and the government didn't work together. And God knows, teachers and conservative governments do not get along.
Now, hold on. I don't want to just
here we
rush
go.
off and
We
put
got a former
my
teacher on the board
union
here.
hat on, or former teacher hat. But
Former teacher slash
but
union
hold on,
hat.
though,
Here we go.
like, seriously, I want to challenge you on that. Work together on what? Because the government, this was my read, and you tell me where I'm wrong.
I'm not blaming the teachers here.
No, like, if I agree with you, they should have been working in lockstep. What should have happened is that the government brought in a task force that included the teachers federations, and they figured this shit out. What they did instead, you can't work together if the other team is like, we got this. That's what the government did. They started in June. Why they didn't start earlier, I don't know. They should have had a team working on this as immediately as after COVID happened to say, okay, what do we need to do to reopen? They didn't. They waited. Then they said, we got this. We're going to give you all a plan. Just give us until beginning of August. And then when they got there, the plan was a scrawled piece of paper that says, you guys make a plan. Thanks. Good luck. Have a great time. And I think the government's was completely negligent in that. Like, they laid out things that they could have easily laid out in June or July. They held on to them until August, gave them a bunch of rules, and then said, okay, now based on these rules, write a plan to reopen your schools. And the teachers, I don't even think, Jeff, unless I'm wrong, the teachers had anything to do with it. It was given to the boards, and maybe the boards consulted the teachers.
So not unique to teachers, right? Go talk to a restaurant that thinks that they had predictability and they had the government work with them. Go talk to a hairdresser. Go talk to any business in this country and say, oh, did you have a lot of input into how your comeback from COVID was? No, it was dictated to you, and you dealt with it. And most of the industries, sure, I think there's a big problem with the way the government handled it on that. But every other industry in this province said, whatever it is, tell us the rules, tell us what we can do. As long as they're based on good health and good science, we're gonna come to the table. We're gonna do what we got to do to get through this thing. There's tons and tons of industries that are suffering, businesses going out of business. It's been a difficult time for everybody.
I want Danielle in here, but I have to go ahead.
I'll give you, the government didn't do a great job on consensus building on this, but the teachers didn't come back with, there's some issues here, but how can we work with you? They came back with,
the teachers. I mean, I have to say, I don't see it, because the teachers in this particular case were not, or they're not the business. Like, you're talking about how hair salons weren't consulted. They just had the list of rules and had to do it. The teachers aren't the hair salons in this case, Jeff. The teachers are the workers at the hair salon whose boss doesn't ask them for input. Like, they are the last of the list. And you can talk about any other industry in this province, but there is not one system, not the hospital system, not the long-term care system, and not private industry, which can compare to the education system in this province for size, scope, and complexity.
Grocery stores?
No, not in each. I know about groceries. I know groceries. No, not a chance. Not a chance. Grocery stores do not compare to the education system in this province for size, scope, and complexity, not in any way. Nothing
when it comes to COVID, they sure do. The amount of people that are going through those doors every day out of necessity, the variety of people that need to go through those doors, if you want to talk about a super spreader type of environment, that's the one.
I have to disagree as a representative for hundreds of grocery store workers across several grocery stores to disagree with you about the complexity. Going back to school is inherently unsafe in this environment. There's no way to make it really safe. I don't know if I was a teacher, what I would do except to say, okay, we got to follow the rules. So I don't know, Danielle, where do we go from here?
I honestly don't know. I really don't know what it looks like, because for me, we're on, like I said, it's week 2, and I called the testing COVID site, just the site assessment site. And I've never had to call there before, obviously, but I spent 2 hours on the line to get through to someone, just to take my name, to call me back.
Wow.
To give me, and then I got a call later on today to actually have the appointment. I still don't even have my actual appointment yet, and they've said it's busy, and it's been busy, and it's going to keep getting busier because all the kids are back in school now. And whether or not they're legitimately COVID or if it's just a precautionary measure, because the way that things are shaking out right now is that it's kind of like, if you get the test and you get a negative result and you can come back when you're symptom free. And if you don't get the test, then you have to wait 14 days before you can come back. So it's not it's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't type thing. So you're sitting and you're waiting for the test to happen. You still have to be at home. You can't go anywhere until you have the test. Then you have to go and have the test. And I'm sorry, I don't love the idea of my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old having a swab tickling their brain matter, right? But if I don't do that, then I'm sitting at home for 14 days waiting for them to clear up and waiting for the green light to go back. And how many times this year are we going to have to do this? Is it every time they have a runny nose? Is it every time they have a sniffle? If a kid coughs in class? And we saw this sort of in the beginning stages of COVID, right? You'd be out in public and you'd feel a tickle in the back of your throat and you'd be like, oh my God, I can't cough right now because the entire world is going to look at me with daggers in their eyes. And it's just a cough. It's dry in here, but we're living in the time of COVID, right?
Yeah, but if your kid coughs,
right?
Yeah, if your kid coughs in the lineup for the gym, then they're going to haul them out of the friggin' lineup, send them to the principal's office, and you're all off work for 2 days.
Exactly. So it's, I know there's plans in place, and we have to have plans in place, but do we have to start tempering sort of how we're handling it in the school environment with a little bit of sort of like reasonability and common sense to it too, right? Like, we know kids are petri dishes of germs. Like, the kids, like within a week, half the kids in school have a snotty nose or are coughing or are sneezing or whatever. That's typical in any school year. That's typical. Like, the first year of daycare with my kids was absolute hell because they were home all the time because they were sick all the time. But now, because we have this specter of COVID looming over top of us, something that would have been completely ordinary last year is now caused to have a kid sent home immediately or isolated immediately and have a parent called in from work to come pick them up. It's just, and I don't know, and I just said, how many times are we gonna have to go through this, right? Like, we keep saying this is the new normal, this is the new normal, this is what we have to expect, and this, but if you're constantly pulling your kid out of school and you're sitting and you're waiting 2 days for a test, or you're sitting and waiting 3 days for a test, or you decide you're gonna wait that 2 weeks because you just don't wanna go through a test again, what's the point of even sending them to school in the first place? Like, they're going to spend more time out of school waiting to have a test or waiting for symptoms to clear up than they are in actual class. So I don't know. It's tricky. And I don't know if I'm having a bit of mixed feelings about it, but yeah. I have no idea what this next 6 months is going to look like. And it's, as a parent, it's kind of stressful and it's a little bit frustrating. And there's a lot of unknowns. And that's basically what this year has been since COVID started. It's the year of the unknown. Nobody knows what the path is forward. Nobody knows what it looks like. Yes, there's plans in place, but you can't always rely on a plan to get you through. And plans don't cover everything, right? So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where we're going to go from there. I don't know if the rise in cases is tied to schools being reopened or daycare centers being reopened, but it's tricky and it's a slippery slope. And I think most parents right now at this point are kind of like watching the clock as their kids coming off the bus or they're picking their kids up from school to sort of look for, do you have a cough? Do you have a snotty nose? What's going on with you? And I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume that eventually schools will probably end up being closed again. or it makes more sense to go to a hybrid learning model, because as I said, when you're sitting and waiting for a test versus having your kid in class, they're still not learning, right?
I find it quite surprising that, you know, there isn't a push for rapid testing in Canada. You know, I think a lot of it is when you're standing next to a dumpster fire, you don't notice the spark, you know, burning beside you. We look at what's happening in the States, we go, oh my God, it could be so much worse. But, you know, other countries around the world, they're pushing for, you know, 2-hour tests, 1-hour tests, you know, next day tests. Where in Canada, it's still a very, you know, roughly structured system to get a test. It's not convenient, you know, scheduling it anyways. When you go get the test, it's fairly easy. But, and then you wait 2 days for your results, which is going to put a lot of people off from getting the test in the first place, because you're in a 2-day lockdown environment until you can prove that you don't have it. And I think that's going to make things difficult for a lot of industries and a lot of businesses and a lot of, you know, situations, long-term care, homes, schools, all of that. So, you know, I think this is a story that's going to continue. What's this new normal look like? How does the government handle it? You know, once the Trump election's done and the dumpster fire is either burning higher or goes down to a smolder, you know, do Canadians start saying, hey, why aren't we pushing for some of this stuff? Why aren't we pushing for the rapidness? So I think it's going to be an interesting few months ahead on this topic.
Thanks, guys. Those are some great points. Now we're going to pass this over to you. Does this matter? Is it important? Tell us why or why not in the comments below.
Be sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next installment in Celebrity Politics, the show's top 10 political stories you missed this summer while at camp.